today's session of Remembering John Pierrakos. And thank you so much. I have Liz Carl with me, who's the co-director of the Institute in Poland, long-term New York faculty member, international teacher, kind of been there, done it all. She's a licensed social worker, and one of the, in the nicest possible way, one of the seniors and elders that we'd like to come to get some more guidance on probably many things, Liz, I suspect. How are you?
I'm okay. I'm here in Poland. I traveled here this week, so because we're having another teaching module next week. So I'm excited, and I'm excited to talk about John.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Congratulations that the school's kicking back in again after this crazy year. And thanks. Look, fill us in. How did you meet John? How did you come into this work? You know, I won't give you a couch to lie on or ask about your mum or anything, but you know, you can start with all of that.
Well, it's a funny story. So more than 30 years ago, when I was in my 30s, I was an opera singer, and I lived in New York City. And every night I would run around the Metropolitan Museum. And one day I was running and I tripped. I was on 79th Street or 78th Street, something like that. And I tripped, and I looked up, and there was this building, and it was called the Institute for the New Age. And I went, what the hell is that? And so and that's when the whole New Age, those words were just coming out. And I went, I have to see what this is. So the next day I went over to the building and I said, what is this place? And it was the beginnings of John's Institute. It was the pathwork. There were pathwork studies going on there. And I thought this was so interesting. I was not too together then. And I had tried talk therapy, it was all right. But I thought, well, let's see what this is. So I got myself a pathwork helper, and then I started hearing about the Institute. I joined a women's group, a very powerful women's group that one of the core practitioners was giving. And then I thought, I thought I need to change careers. I had no idea what I was going to do. It was a very, time of turmoil. And so then I finally figured out from my therapist that maybe I could be a therapist. And so she said, I'm going to talk to John for you. So she did, to see if I could get into the Institute. And that's when I met John. And John looked at me and he said, you can come into my institute. I don't do a Greek accent too well, but he says, but you must get MSW too. And I thought to myself, what's an MSW? It's a master's in social work. I didn't even know what he was talking about. But I was so excited about the therapy that was happening with me. And then I wanted to be a therapist. I went, okay. So he took me on. I got into NYU, and I did core training all at the same time. It was a very intense time in my life. So I enter this institute that's unlike anything I've ever done, a process group. I remember I was sitting there going, what? And it was, and the Institute was in some turmoil when I entered. Well, the Institute back then was in turmoil for many reasons. And so by the time I finished my second year of training, half of the class left. So wow. that was like, what just happened? But there was something about this work that just grabbed me. It just grabbed me. And I thought, this is kind of screwed up here, but I think I want to stay because I need to learn what's going on here. And I did. And John taught us. Sometimes we didn't understand what he was talking about. But whenever I'm serious. I mean, sometimes he would go off and we'd all be sitting there going, but when he worked with someone, it was like a wizard had appeared. We just, I mean, I'm sure you've heard this reaction from everybody that we watched, it looked like magic.
Yes.
But it was this incredible intuitive healing energy and power that he had. So I graduated, and I was still excited about the institute, and I got to be an assistant. Uh, Jack, I was an assistant to Jack. That was great, Jack Conway.
Yeah.
And then John. Well, there's all kinds of details, but John wanted me to be a teacher. So I started working as a teacher, and I remember I was so shocked. It was after his death that I was given the honor of being a senior teacher, and I was given a plaque, and I was just, that he had so much faith in me was really remarkable.
Yes.
So through all the ups and downs, and there have been in this organization, I loved the work, and I mean, he was a big part of it. He was a character. He was an amazing character. He used to wear these pantsuits, these suits with these, but I wore this just because, because of John. He always had some kind of fancy thing around his neck. And,
Yeah.
and he was always, he was a human. He wasn't all perfect. He wasn't a guru, but he was such a wise man. And he was excited. He was excited about new things. He was excited about life. I loved him. I thought he was nuts sometimes, but I loved him. I was at his, when the memorial service went on, after he died, there was, people have probably told you about the memorial service. It was in this beautiful hall in New York City, and people came from all over the world. And another practitioner and I, Jim Bonney, we sang Amazing Grace. And I just, he was a very important person in my life, a very important person. And I came, right towards the last 10 years of his life. But when I finally got involved in the faculty, we wanted to start an international association back then.
Yes.
Ham Chubbuck and I. And it was just, he was a big idea man. He wasn't real good at details or structure,
Yeah.
But enough people followed him to help make that structure. And so it's really exciting that finally, decades later, we do have an international association. But it was one of his dreams. I mean, he traveled all over the place.
Sure did.
Yeah, and so this is my tribe. I have different tribes in my life, but this is a big one. This is my professional life. Even though I'm a clinical social worker, I'm a regular mental health professional. But to say now that I've been a body psychotherapist for more than 30 years is so cool. It's so cool. And all the trauma people are like, you've been doing this for 30 years? I'm like, yeah. Before it was like there. But what?
You must have started with 2.
Yeah. So that's how I met him. I got to be with him. We had some wonderful times in Phoenicia. Phoenicia was where the Pathwork Center was and where his home was.
Yes.
We danced with John. I sang, I wrote because I was still singing then, I made a song about John based on the song from Carmen, L'amour. And it was great. He did teach me about the vitality of life. And now, I am an elder now, and I just turned 70, and he's with me a lot. In fact, when so do you want to know about the school in Poland?
Please tell me about all that's legacy that you're taking forward and evolving. That's exactly what we'd like to hear about.
Okay, because that was so in all of this, I also met Ala Konopka Ulanecki. Okay. And we met because of when I had children, when the children were little. And I met her, and she said she's a Polish therapist, and then, you know, we were dealing with, she was a nanny. And I said, yeah, we were talking about my work. And I said, well, I do this kind of weird kind of therapy. She said, oh yeah. And I said, yeah, it's, it's called, you know, it works with the body. And she said, really? She says, I took some bioenergetic workshops in Poland. And I went, get out. So that's, so I said, oh, you have to meet John. And that was like my mission.
Yeah.
And you know, she was young and beautiful, and John was happy to meet her. But
I figured that you might be.
Yeah. But I, you know, because I felt very strongly that, I mean, and she also was very interested in the work. She started working for him. He finally hired her as his assistant. And one day he told her, he said, you and Liz will bring core to Poland.
Oh.
And Ala went, yeah. She didn't even want to go back to Poland. She had thought she was going to just stay in the United States. And so we kind of left it at that. However, about 8 years ago, I was asked to, well, I have a friend, and she's the head of Core London, Melissa Halichev, Hillary, and she said, you know, there's a lot of Polish people in London, and they seem to be interested in this. You want to come and do something? And so I went and taught for her. Well, first of all, I called up Ala, and I said, Ala, how am I going to do this? I said, I can speak Polish like I'm speaking to you. I can talk about what are we having for dinner, but to speak the language of core in Polish scared the daylights out of me. I didn't know, you know, I couldn't do it. So she and I, we would sit once a week, and we would go through an intro for core energetics line by line, and we would do it in Polish. We'd do it in English, and then do it in Polish. So I was practicing with her. I was scared to death when I got to London. But then I went, and there was 35 people showed up. Amazing. And I started talking and showing them core energetics in Polish, in my funny Polish, and people were interested. And so then from that, I came home and I said, you think we should maybe take this to Poland? She says, I don't know. She says, you know, we talk about spirit, and Poland is a highly Catholic country. So, you know, that might not go over too well. But little by little, we made it happen. There are people in Poland that said, come, we'll help you. And as soon as we did workshops, we went once and had about 14 workshops in little towns all over Poland. And then Fantastic. A bunch of professionals, they had an institute, they had a workshop with us, and they handed us a piece of paper at the end of the workshop, and they said, we are your first students. We want to learn this. And that's how it started. Fantastic. And we were totally not prepared. I mean, there was nothing translated. And this, you know, Poles can speak English and they learn English, but if we were going to do this in that country, we wanted it to be in the Polish language. Sure. So we did it. We put it together. We had our first graduating class after a 4-year training program, and now we have a 3rd edition of students. So I'm very proud to, you know, we're the first Eastern European country to have an institute. It's not easy, but what's easy, you know?
Yeah, that's fantastic. I'm sure John would be so proud of what you're achieving.
Oh, we have John's picture, John and Ava's picture in each of our training rooms, and practically every attunement at the beginning of a module. Well, I call him in a lot. I call them both in, especially when we have problems. In my mind, I say, John, Ava, come on, we need your help. And I think yes, I believe both of them are happy with what we did.
That's wonderful. So, I mean, you came into the training. Did you work with John as a trainer and a therapist, or was it just in the workshop? So what was your exposure with him?
I worked with, he was my teacher. Yeah, he was never my therapist. I did do a couple of consults with him, and
Yep.
that was very, very touching. What, you know, it was very touching. It was very helpful. I realized, I don't know, I probably I had some transference with him, but not too much. I mean, I don't know. I had transference with other people, but with him, he was my, he was a major, major teacher in my life. Yeah, he was. Any
So
other
in terms,
questions?
you've spoken about some amazing things there, but as in this moment, as you feel John here, as you're speaking about your history, what are the key messages? What are the key learnings that stick with you that you learnt from John?
So I say this to all my students. I say, John always reminded us. I mean, he always reminded us, come from your heart. You must come from your heart. And that is maybe the biggest lesson.
Yeah.
That, his intention was love. He talked about love all the time, opening your heart. And it's really thrilling to hear our students and our graduates, because I'm supervising now a lot, to hear them say, well, I opened my heart to my client, or I looked past the annoyances or the irritations and opened my heart. And that's the biggest lesson. That's the biggest lesson John gave me. Plus the idea of vitality and having adventures and going against all odds. I mean, John used to travel, and Ella and we laugh about this. He used to travel, and then there were no computers or anything, so we'd have he'd drag around these big charts. I mean, and schlepping this stuff all over the world. Against all odds, he would show up. He would show up in a country. He would do a training. And so when I kind of go, oh God, this is so hard. Here I go again to Poland. I always talk to John. I say, all right, okay, I'm doing this. I get it. This is my legacy. And he left an incredible legacy. Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. So, I mean, for John, this idea of an evolutionary process was really what he was working on. And of course, then the process itself is evolving. What are you seeing in terms of the work you're doing and the input you're having and your colleagues around you about how that work is evolving?
Okay. And thank goodness that he had that kind of vision. Because I think he'd be thrilled with what's going on now with the brain science and the neurology and the polyvagal theories and all the trauma work. We blend this into our training, but it's all based on the foundation of what he gave us, what he and Ava gave us, what he and Alan Lowen gave us. It's really interesting because in Poland, bioenergetics there are some institutes, and we're kind of, rivals.
Oh.
And oh yeah, and people say, so what's the difference? And we say, well, there's a lot of similarities. Both men, created bioenergetics, but we bring in spirit, and that's why people keep on showing up in this country. They're seeking that. So the concepts that when John took in the concepts, the pathwork concepts, and brought them together with the body, it's the foundation. And then all this other stuff. For instance, we're this module, we're bringing in a teacher who is very knowledgeable in breathing and coherent breathing, which is somebody. Okay, we all breathe, but people are dreaming up stuff all the time. And if it helps, we teach it. We're careful, and John was really careful about this too, to not dilute the work too much. To keep the foundations, the character structures. You can call them something different if you want, but to keep, keep all of that and the path work, especially mask, higher self, lower self, all of that. But then to add the science, do what we need to do to help people. And I think he'd be thrilled. I really do.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's so beautiful. And it's lovely to see the work spreading further in that Eastern Bloc, isn't it?
Well, it is. There's now, so we have some people in the Czech Republic
Mhm.
that we're interacting with. Yeah, it's I think humans all over the world, there's this level of humanity that's, I guess we can call it the alternative learners or whatever, the seekers
The
that
seekers.
are, yeah, and they're, we were so thrilled that we found them in Poland. We didn't know if we would, but we found them and they found us.
Yeah. It's a bit both ways, because there are so many people and the younger generations these days that are not only aware but are seekers, and they do find us in their own creative ways, don't they?
Yes, yes, yes. Yes, it's, and that's what my job is, to get the young people going in this, so I will finally rest and they will take over. And I feel very compelled to do that, to pass on the messages.
That's
Yeah.
beautiful. So, I mean, if I may come back to you just for a moment, you spoke
Mhm.
about meeting John in the 30s, and you had one career and your career changing. You spoke about your kids a little bit later on. I mean, how did your family and the rest of your life fit into this incredible intensity that you jumped into those 30s stage of your life?
Hmm. Um, some people like to go on vacations, fishing vacation, I don't know, whatever. I'm the kind of person that likes to go to workshops and do intense work.
Yeah,
So my family would go, boy, you really know how to have fun, because I'd go to a training or do some teaching and
yeah,
come back crying my eyes out, but feeling, really something had transformed. And I think they just put up with it. One of my daughters, she said, I'm never ever going to be a counselor. I don't care what I do, but I'm not going to do that. And guess what she's doing now? So I think that some of it, she's giving service. She's a nutritional counselor. She works. She's a beaut. So I'm. That's it's okay. This lifetime for me is about giving service. It was started being, very narcissistic, being in the theater, which was wonderful, which is very helpful for this work, by the way.
definitely.
Being an actress, oh yes.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I do a lot of psychodrama when I work with people.
I
And
figured. I figured. That's wonderful. So, in that previous career, so you mentioned you've been an opera singer. Was that the range of the acting, or are you doing some acting work in itself?
no, I started off just as an actress, and then I
Okay.
wanted to do musical comedy, but then I got hooked into opera, which is, it's not an easy business to be in. It's, and I was pretty good, but I think that I was I wasn't great, but I was a pretty good singer, very good actress, not such a good dancer.
Yeah, I can see how those skills are coming through now, and especially in the teaching part and supervision parts. Obviously, therapy is one level, but being so effective at those other levels, these would be wonderful skills and talents and experiences to bring in.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, if we could probably round off, what are the key messages if John were to give us, besides open your heart? Sorry, my atrocious Greek accent. What do you think he'd be telling us now if he was sitting here?
Um, I, I I think like I said, I think he would be open to all the new science, and to not limit ourselves.
Mhm.
Um, he was, he was unfinished also, as probably I will be, when I pass. we're all learning our lessons as we live, for as long as we live.
Mhm.
I would have some things to say to him about how he handled certain things. I think, you know, I forgive him, but I think he was somewhat of a misogynist, and he was kind of homophobic.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and that, and he he let some things he let some things fly by that shouldn't have, in terms of ethics and things like that.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's, with all the effort that all of us, all the directors now, you know, are doing to create standards and to really stick by them,
Mm.
including ethics. I think the institute's in a better place than it was when John was running it. But we needed John to. John was the visionary.
Yeah. I mean,
He
he was
was
a
the
creative innovator.
imperfect vision.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, and things do need to evolve, don't they? That idea needs, as you said, to form structure around it, and it's just going to that another level again now with with the
Yeah.
group that are at the leadership. So I mean, that's wonderful work, and I get the feeling he'd be very, very proud of the leadership group and where it's going and how they're coming together, and really creating the platform for the next level of evolution.
Yes. You know, we needed a wild man to do this. He
Yeah,
was wild.
yeah, yeah.
He was wild. He got into all kinds of trouble, but good, he wiggled out of it too.
So it's good. He had a lot of fun as well.
Oh, we had so much fun. Yeah,
Yeah.
we had so much fun with him.
Would you is there a memory that pops up of some fun non-work type situations that you found yourself in with John?
Well, there's the last time we danced, and he
Mm.
liked ouzo. Has anybody told you that?
I didn't. That's the first time hearing that he liked Uzo.
So, you know, it's that Greek liqueur.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Makes sense.
at the end of a faculty meeting in Phoenicia, we bring out the ouzo,
Yeah.
and then we just start dancing and laughing, and it was great. It was great. It was great for me to, as a young person, to watch him with all that excitement about life, and it's stuck with me. You know, that's the juice that I still have.
Mhm.
So, did I answer your question?
It feels pretty good to me. I don't know what you said, but it feels great. No, thank you, Liz. You did. Hey, thanks for taking your time out. I know you're on and off planes and you've got a big week ahead. So I really appreciate you sharing some of these wonderful memories and messages of John. And, I'll come back to you because I think there'll be plenty of things we can chat about that we can capture and put in, later episodes if that works for you.
Well, I also want to say I I pass on what he gave me through me to you, because you are one of the younger ones. And I think I told somebody the other day, I says, you know, there's an institute that's going on in Bali, and they went, what? And I said, yeah. I said, I told you, this is international. So I'm excited for you too, that you're passing this on.
Yeah, thank you
You're
so much.
passing.
Thank you so much. And it's wonderful to learn from some of you guys who have, been pioneering building these institutes and going out there and taking the work in this way. And that's what we need to do. We need to stand on the experiences and the achievements of all of you guys and try and emulate and build on them as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, great.
Good.
Thanks so much, Liz. Have a wonderful training block, and we'll catch up with you soon. Hey,
Okay, we'll see you soon. Bye-bye, Renil.
bye.
Bye.